Okay. Hi, everyone. I'll be presenting some of the latest and some older research that McKinsey has been running on the future of work and on future skills. The context in which we have launched this research is one where many employers have often complained about new hires not having the right skills, but oftentimes they're not complaining about the technical skills. It's really something that they call in general soft skills. And linked to this, then we have seen that automation and digitization has started to change the nature of work. COVID has also exacerbated the need to learn digital skills. And so these need for soft skills has only increased in recent time. And so for this particular reason, the latest research has gone much deeper into what these soft skills are. So I'll start with one of the first research that McKinsey Global Institute ran about 5 years ago. This research looked at all the occupations in the market. For each occupation, it looks at all the tasks and activities, and it looked at whether every specific activity could be automated with existing technology and how long it would take, depending on the country, to automate that activity. Now, the high-level story was that there's a very large number of occupations that will change significantly. Not many will completely disappear, but change is going to be widespread across most of these occupations. The second piece of research that we ran is trying to tie a specific set of skills to each of those tasks that the McKinsey Global Institute has analyzed, and see with the increasing automation and digitization, where is the balance going to go? How much time people will have to spend in the future using different type of skills? And these are the results that we found, right? Both in the United States and in Western Europe, but this is somewhat similar in all the countries we have run this research, including some more emerging and developing countries. The balance of skills is moving, the balance of time that people will spend using skills is moving more towards the skills that are in the higher cognitive, social-emotional skills and technological skills. So this was a bit the starting point for our latest research, because at this high level, higher cognitive, social-emotional skill, it's still very difficult to think of how do I create a program? How do I create assessments? It's still too high level. And so this is the focus of the latest research, which has gone much deeper in defining and assessing what are these future skills? What are these skills that citizens will need to future-proof themselves for tomorrow? And we have looked at across 15 countries. We have had 18,000 respondents to this. And so now I'll share the results of this research. Let me start though a bit with how we constructed this and why we did this research, right? First of all, we saw that there was always a discussion whether we're talking about skills, attitudes, attributes, competencies. And so we wanted to cut a bit across all of these more academic and nomenclature discussions and say there's clearly some elements of talent. It's a combination. Sometimes it's closer to attitudes, sometimes to mindsets, but there are some elements that clearly form the building blocks for people in any occupation and in any sector to continuously be ready to learn and ready to be to meeting the needs of the future of work. And so what we did then is we had a long list. When we started to unpack the higher cognitive, the social emotional and the technological skills, we had a very long list looking at the literature of all the potential skills, attitudes, attributes, and so on. And so what we did is we tried to filter them through a three-step process. One is we filter any element of talent that was linked to people being able to stay relevant to machine as automation grows the amount of activities and the type of activities that can be automated. The second filter was around any skill that helps people operate successfully in environments that are increasingly digital. And the third lens was around any skill or attitude or mindset that help increase the adaptability. Given the future of work, we have seen the key thing is that there's going to be a lot of change in any occupation. And so there needs to be continuous learning. And so out of this filtering and selection process, we got to basically this is the closest we could get with a periodic table of elements of talent, similar a bit to the periodic table of chemistry elements. And we try to bring a bit more structure and clarity to a problem that otherwise, if it stays at the soft skills or at the future skill, it's too vague. And so the purpose here was really, let's get very concrete and practical on what these future skills are. And now with this idea of elements of talent, which are, as I mentioned, a combination of skills and attitudes. So you may recognize the categories here, right? So on the top left corner, you have the cognitive skills, which we split them in critical thinking, which itself includes a variety of skills, structured problem solving, understanding biases, logical reasoning, seeking relevant information. Then you have communication. We have planning a way of working, and we include mental flexibility also in this broader cognitive category. Then you have on the top right corner, the interpersonal, bottom left corner is the self-leadership, and the combination of these is basically the unpacking of the social-emotional skills. And again, we try to create groups and to go quite deep in what are exactly the skills and attitudes that are behind entrepreneurship, self-awareness, goal achievements, teamwork effectiveness, developing relationship and mobilizing systems. And then ultimately, there was a long discussion on whether we also should have digital skills. The technological skill frame was very broad. Many technological skills are very specific of an industry or a function, but still we saw that there are some basic digital skills are really needed for everyone in whatever the occupations, whatever the function they work on. So we decided to include the basic ones here with a group around digital fluency and citizenship, which is really the more basic skills. A group around trying to understand how digital system works. And you see data literacy, understanding how smart system work, some literacy of cybersecurity, tech translation and enablement, which is around the ability to speak the language of, or understand at least the language of both the tech side and the business side. And then there's a category around software use and development, which is not about being software developer, but is having the basic literacy to understand how code works, what it can and what it can't do, how to analyze and work with data, and how to, and a bit the computational and algorithmic thinking. So that was, to some extent, not the end point, but the starting point, because once we were able to identify and define these skills and attitudes in such a granular way, we were able, for example, to build a research tool to assess what's the level of proficiency of a general citizen along each of these elements. And so this is what we did. So to read this page, 100 is not the score of the empathy of a nurse and the digital skill of a software developer. We calibrated 100 to be the level which is useful for any person to have whatever the job they're going to do. So what you see here is that there is, on average, a gap along all of the spectrum of elements, right? All of these categories and skill groups have some gaps. The digital gap was bigger. Now, the field research was done before COVID. This might be different today because we've seen a lot of digital upskilling happen and was forced to happen during COVID. And then the other bigger gaps we found was on communication and the ability to plan and work in an agile way. But the message we found is across country, the gap, there's an average, a big gap to fill to get to 100, which is the desirable level, not the excellence, not the advanced level. Then what we try to do is to see, can we find already today some correlation between those people that have a higher proficiency in these deltas with some of the outcomes, be that employment, the chances of being in a higher income group in each of the countries that we looked at, and the chances of being more satisfied with one's job. And so we saw that at least for some of these deltas, we found significant correlation, higher for some, lower for others. But this is the way to read this page is one single element of the 56 that I've showed. The difference between, there's 3 levels of proficiency. So the difference between having proficiency 1 and 2 or 2 or 3, only on one of these, everything else held constant, any other demographic held constant, gives a 20% higher chances of being either in the employed or a higher income bracket or in satisfied with the job. So that's for a single element. So that's to some extent quite significant. And so this was to say these skills, these elements of talent are important. There is already data today. It's not just for the future, right? This is the case today. And in some conversations we had after we published the paper, many said, look, what you have here is to some extent not new, right? Many have been saying that these are the skills that are needed the most. So many call them durable skills rather than future skills, because those stand the test of time. Those stand the test of, across industry, across function, but also across times. In this page, I show another reflection after we have published the paper. Many said if it's 56, it can't be really that these are the foundational, right? There must be a hierarchy. And so this was our attempt to understand, is there indeed a hierarchy in these elements of talent? And we saw indeed that, there are some technical deltas, the ones that are more linked to digital. Those we kind of think them as at the bottom of the hierarchy, because they are needed today, but their shelf life is quite short, right? And it's not that these allow to learn other and to develop other deltas. So those are important, but more at the bottom of the hierarchy. Then in the middle, we saw that there are some of these elements of talent deltas that are more linked to humans, like being able to really intrinsically human, and therefore machine won't be really automating them anytime soon. And so those we saw, all the critical thinking, some of the interpersonal skills, those fit in there. And those clearly have a longer shelf life, but we still thought that that wasn't the top of the hierarchy, right? Like at the top of the hierarchy, we found that there are some of these elements of talent that only once you have them, and if you have them, you then are able to continuously, develop your human deltas and learn new technical deltas, right? And so we thought that there was really something more important, which is around, especially when you think of earlier education and what the education system, or what what's the when you can still shape, or you're still in a situation to change the person, what can you focus on, right? And so that's where mental flexibility, so around the adaptability, ability to learn, coping with uncertainty, but also the self-leadership, being aware, taking feedback, working on feedback, having the confidence to speak up, the grit and resilience to pursue goals. So those felt always a bit more at the higher level of the hierarchy. And so if you want, the ones that are really foundational are that narrower set. And if I go back to the previous page, what you can see on the top elements that are most correlated to impact, to outcomes, you have adaptability, which is the first for employment. You have coping with uncertainty. There is both the second for employment and the second for job satisfaction. Self-confidence is in the top 3 as well for income and job satisfaction. So we saw that those growth delta, also the data is suggesting they are the one with the highest correlation with outcomes. So there is something around the hierarchy as well. As I move into closure, this is maybe the more surprising finding, because when we try to correlate the proficiency we found in these deltas with whether someone had finished university or only a vocational certificate or only high school, overall we found high correlation with the overall score, right? So there was clearly the ones that have gone through university had an average score overall that was higher than the ones stopping earlier. But then we found that wasn't the case for all the elements, right? I think what you see on the right here are the elements where we found that the highest correlation between whether someone had gone and finished universities and their proficiency in these elements. And so you'll find the digital ones here. You'll find mostly the cognitive ones. And this is also what the education system will tell you, right? Like we focus a lot on the academics, and so naturally it's more the cognitive that we develop. We don't necessarily focus on the rest. And so what's interesting on the right is also when you see inspiring trust and humility, those are two elements where there is higher correlation with education, but the coefficient is negative. So the more it was easy to predict whether someone had high or low proficiency in inspiring trust. But you would say that the ones that have finished university have a lower proficiency in inspiring trust and humility than the one that finished earlier. On the left, you have all the elements where we found very weak correlation, if at all, with, so it was really difficult to forecast whether someone who had high or low proficiency based on whether they finished university or not. And so all the skills, all the elements on the left, you see that there's very little correlation with education. And the problem for employers is that these elements weren't developed on average, at least, through the education system. And so this is a shortfall that the employer needs to start addressing. Some of them, they address it by trying to hire only people that have those skills. But it's not always difficult to assess them before you actually get to know the person. And so it's something that employers are starting to having to work after people have been hired. And maybe I'm closing with this picture, which is a bit a different research that we did after COVID, where we look how the nature and the focus of what organizations were training their people on has shifted between pre-COVID and post-COVID. So somehow the COVID challenge, besides the digital, which is obvious, it shifted a lot of attention on these more elements of talent or transversal skills, which are more linked to the self-leadership and the interpersonal skills. So we asked, we had an option of a list of 25 skills. This was a different taxonomy. It was done from a different part of McKinsey. And what they found, though, is that the ones where they had seen the biggest shift between the focus, the share of people giving training and taking learnings on those skills before COVID and after, the biggest shift was in all you see at the top, like leadership, critical thinking, decision making, project management, adaptability. Basically, so these are what you have seen, very close to what I presented here, right? So to some extent, this COVID somehow has made this shift, has shifted the attention towards these skills. And I think both in the education, but also in the adult training world, and therefore in the world of corporate, the key question now is how to best develop these, because the challenge is that it's not easy to assess them. They're oftentimes not teachable. It's really encouraging people and in developing them. So it's what's the best way to guide people in this personal growth and development journey, as opposed to giving yet another training. And I think this is the challenge, the biggest challenge that most of the L&D colleagues will have in the next few years. Thanks, everyone. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Saludarles mi nombre es Jorge Blando, trabajo aquí en el Tecnológico de Monterrey y por alguna razón que desconozco no puedo colocar mi video en la presentación, pero espero que estén viendo mi presentación y quisiera compartir con ustedes algunos elementos sobre la hiperpersonalización del talento en la era digital. Antes que nada, bueno, estos son los tres mensajes que vamos a conversar el día de hoy. Vamos a hablar de la hiperpersonalización, del aprendizaje personalizado y adaptativo, y vamos a hablar de los beneficios y desafíos, pero espero que estén viendo mi presentación. Y bueno, pues ya quisiera compartir con ustedes algunos elementos sobre la hiperpersonalización del talento en la era digital. A los clientes como nuestros invitados a una fiesta, ¿no? Antes que nada, bueno, estos son los tres mensajes que vamos a siempre estar el día de hoy por mejorar cada aspecto de la experiencia metodología personalizado y adaptativo. Y eso claramente aplica también en las organizaciones para nuestros colaboradores. Y bueno, pues ya desde hablamos de la personalización, algunos elementos es un concepto ya comienza desde hace muchos años, pero hay que irla llevando a nuestros invitados a una fiesta. En algunos lugares que nada, bueno, están los tres mensajes que siempre comentan que por mejorar aquellas compañías que tienen mejores necesidades personalizado y además la personalización les permite mejorar la experiencia para nuestros colaboradores. Y bueno, pues ya desde antes quieren transformarse como hace muchos años, así que hay que irla llevando a nuestros invitados. Esto de la hiperpersonalización es que nada, claramente es el camino que vamos a, ya siempre comenta que está impactando de manera muy relevante las necesidades personalizadas y además la personalización muchas organizaciones lo hacen bastante bien a veces mejor pues ya desde nosotros de la data que vamos creando en los áreas como nuestro comportamiento, nuestra huella digital la llevamos dejando. Esto de la hiperpersonalización es que nada, y bueno, ¿qué es la hiperpersonalización? Entonces, siempre la vivimos todos los días, que está impactando en las compañías relevantes de muchas soluciones donde buscan personalizar esos servicios y adaptan a lo que nosotros como clientes necesitamos. Se vaya a la comportamiento de la hiperpersonalización. Y bueno, ¿qué es? Como van cambiando continuamente estas preferencias, eso es un continuo y definitivamente la llegada de la inteligencia artificial y el machine learning nos facilita elevar esta personalización a gran escala y la hiperpersonalización en el mundo hoy es un game changer, clarísimo. O sea, es algo que llegó para quedarse y que está transformando los negocios, la vida de las personas y la vida del mundo. Permítame entonces ahora sí ir acercando y aproximándome a qué es un poco el aprendizaje personalizado y adaptativo y luego hablaremos también incluso de los beneficios que tiene para las organizaciones este tema. Primero, el aprendizaje personalizado, pues lo que busca es dar aprendizaje a la medida y se basa en aquellos intereses, en aquellas experiencias, en aquellas metodologías que prefiere nuestro aprendedor, en este caso en las organizaciones, nuestro colaborador, para que puedan ir ellos a su propio ritmo, dependiendo de sus necesidades actuales, de su rol actual, si va cambiando o no, y un poco el upskilling, reskilling, que también se ha estado conversando. Entonces, ese es el aprendizaje personalizado y se puede utilizar con o sin tecnología. El aprendizaje adaptativo es una forma del aprendizaje personalizado que definitivamente utiliza la tecnología como un aliado y ese poder de cómputo para poder modificar los contenidos e irse adaptando a las necesidades del aprendedor. Lo hace a través de algoritmos, de inteligencia artificial y modificando todo pues, en tiempo real. Yo creo que es una clave importante. La ventaja que hoy nos da el cómputo de poder tener data en tiempo real sobre qué interacciones y qué comportamiento está teniendo nuestro colaborador, el aprendedor en este caso. Y bueno, el 93% de las organizaciones pues, están de acuerdo en que el aprendizaje personalizado ayuda a mejorar el desempeño de las organizaciones y de las personas. Esto según ahí ese estudio que allí lo cito allí abajo. Entonces, si ya se va caminando hacia allá, a veces a veces sin tecnología, pero van caminando las organizaciones a sacarle provecho a este aprendizaje personalizado. Bueno, y me hace recordar y les traigo a la memoria esta curva, ¿no? La de Forgetting Curve, donde pueden ustedes observar que lo que un adulto, una persona, un joven, un niño aprende, pues en cuestión de días lo puede ir olvidando, ¿verdad? Hasta en un 90%. Todo depende en el caso de los adultos, que esto no sucede cuando se incorpora, cuando se suma a un aprendizaje anterior y cuando hay una experiencia de aplicación y es significativo para su vida, entonces sí se incorpora, ya no se olvida. Pero el conocimiento en lo general, así cuando se transmite, esta charla que le estoy dando, pues corre este riesgo de que en cuestión de días se les haya olvidado hasta el 90%, ¿no? Entonces, el aprendizaje adaptativo justamente lo que quiere es contribuir a que eso no suceda. Y lo que hace es crear caminos para que el aprendedor vaya tomando decisiones y lo empodera para que sea él quien autogestione su aprendizaje. El aprendizaje adaptativo lo que busca es automatizar esos procesos, esas trayectorias, esos contenidos, para que por medio de métricas vaya optimizando la trayectoria del aprendedor y pueda desarrollar ciertas competencias con un nivel de maestría, pero reconociendo lo que ya sabe. Y definitivamente es la tecnología la que nos puede ayudar a generar este tipo de trayectorias flexibles, ¿no? Esto nos permite que pueda hacer la educación más accesible, más flexible y con mejores resultados. Con la ayuda de un Learning Management System o un Learning Experience Platform, se pueden crear trayectorias de aprendizaje para nuestros colaboradores que favorezcan ciertos conocimientos, desarrollo de habilidades y competencias. Esta medición continua de cada progreso del aprendedor es la que va ayudando a ver cuáles son sus fortalezas, cuáles son sus áreas de oportunidad y nos evita perder el tiempo en competencias que ya domina, ¿verdad? Se requiere, pues, obviamente una medición profunda del aprendizaje, como si fuera un GPS para Waze, ¿verdad? Que va constantemente dando datos de cómo está el tráfico y cuál es la mejor ruta para desplazarte de un lugar a otro. Pues exactamente igual aquí en el aprendizaje adaptativo, vas tomando datos de cómo va aprendiendo la persona y en función de ello va personalizando la siguiente ruta, ¿no? Pero lo más relevante es que genera data y esa data nos da insights muy interesantes a los que estamos diseñando las soluciones de aprendizaje, a los capacitadores, entrenadores, a los coaches y por supuesto, pues también a los líderes, ¿verdad? Ahora, ¿cuáles son entonces los beneficios y los ¿Por qué iniciar esta aventura en mi organización y entrar en esta materia del aprendizaje adaptativo? Bueno, pues primero, el aprendizaje personalizado en general, pues permite que se genere un mejor desempeño de acuerdo a estudios que en Estados Unidos se han realizado, donde las compañías que tienen mejor desempeño en diferentes métricas, entre ellas la financiera, utilizan mucho más el aprendizaje personalizado que las que no tienen buen desempeño. Y ahí hay unos puntos de diferencia. Esa es una razón importante por qué hacerlo. La otra es porque mejora el desempeño a largo plazo, ya que incrementa el ownership, la propiedad de autogestión de esos colaboradores con su aprendizaje. Y recuerden que las organizaciones siempre es un gran reto, ¿no? Que terminen los programas, que terminen los cursos. La siguiente es el uso del aprendizaje personalizado. Se ha estado expandiendo en el tiempo y reporta que ya el 83% empiezan a utilizarlo con algo de tecnología. Todavía muy incipiente, pero ya se está empezando a utilizar con más fuerza. Y pues el poder de la inteligencia artificial claramente nos permite poder ajustar los contenidos de manera ágil y en tiempo real. Entonces, esto permite diseminar el conocimiento pues, a lo largo de toda la organización y que no se quede solo en unos cuantos. Eso pues genera mayor productividad. Entonces, recuerden que una forma, un tamaño no aplica para todos, ¿verdad? O sea, estamos muy acostumbrados a generar programas de capacitación y de entrenamiento para todos los líderes. Digo, es una forma que nos ha funcionado con cierta eficacia, pero creo que hoy con la tecnología podemos empezar a caminar en buscar aprendizajes personalizados para cada líder, dependiendo de lo que necesitan ellos aprender y a partir de lo que requiere la organización también. Otros beneficios que tiene el aprendizaje adaptativo a las organizaciones, pues es que se disminuye el tiempo que invierte el colaborador en un aprendizaje que no le es útil porque pues ya lo sabe, ya lo conoce, ¿verdad? Sí, a todos nos pasa que cuando hay un programa de formación, algún líder se queja de que pues es que ya esto era muy básico, esto ya lo sabía, pero para otros es muy importante y es nuevo, totalmente novedoso. Entonces hay ese perfilamiento a veces es complicado porque no todos estamos parados de la misma base, ¿no? También le da información a la organización de lo que el colaborador va aprendiendo y a qué ritmo lo va haciendo y permite al mismo tiempo documentar el progreso y eso pues, se vuelve muy relevante en estos tiempos, ¿no? Ahora recuerden que cuando uno atrae talento, el talento viene de diferentes experiencias, diferentes organizaciones, diferentes culturas, diferentes países incluso. Entonces, el aprendizaje adaptativo permite que se vaya ajustando el aprendizaje en función al desempeño que va teniendo la persona. Y por último, pues el tema de la data que se va generando, que es muy útil para obtener insights de lo que está sucediendo con nuestros colaboradores. Entonces, es una fuente muy importante para lo que hemos llamado el People Analytics, que claramente es una tendencia, y que aquellas organizaciones que sean capaces de obtener datos y convertirlos en insights y en base a ello tomar decisiones, pues seguramente son las que van a poder mejorar en su talento y en su desempeño. Y ya lo decía Carly Fiorina, que la meta es convertir esa data en información que verdaderamente nos sirva para generar conclusiones y tener insights valiosos para la toma de decisiones. Ahora, desde la perspectiva del colaborador o de la persona, pues yo asumo un rol proactivo de mi aprendizaje porque me voy dando cuenta que me dan chance de seleccionar mis trayectorias, qué competencias, subcompetencias. En el TEC lo estamos haciendo a través de una plataforma que se llama The Learning Gate, donde no tienes que tomar todo, sino vas tomando unas subcompetencias a partir de un diagnóstico, lo que tú vas realmente necesitando a tu tiempo, a tu ritmo, y ya no es solamente ir a tomar un curso con otras 30 personas en línea, sino más bien ir a mi propio ritmo y lo que yo realmente necesito. Entonces me hace responsable de mi aprendizaje. Permite priorizar lo que es relevante para mí de acuerdo a mis circunstancias, lo que estoy viviendo en mi empresa, y me permite sentirme de alguna manera más empoderado en mi carrera profesional, en mi rumbo, en mi destino. Y lo que les decía yo del propio ritmo, creo que eso también es bastante relevante, ¿no? La pregunta de toneladas que yo les hago a ustedes es, aquellos que me escuchan hoy de las organizaciones, la gente de desarrollo de talento, la pregunta es, ¿tu equipo tiene las competencias que se requieren para implantar el aprendizaje adaptativo? Es más, ¿los colaboradores de tu organización están listos para una experiencia de aprendizaje adaptativa? ¿Qué estás experimentando algo en esta línea? ¿Con quién? ¿Quién es tu socio? ¿Quién te ayuda? Es un poco reflexionar que este sueño de implementar el aprendizaje adaptativo, que cada vez más organizaciones lo tienen, no se puede lograr solo, se requiere de aliados y además se requiere un cambio cultural importante. ¿Cuáles son entonces los desafíos del aprendizaje personalizado y del aprendizaje adaptativo? Bueno, pues el primero de ellos es que las herramientas tecnológicas aún son insuficientes, no están todavía al alcance de todos y de todas y es todavía ese un reto. La otra es que no se le asigna la prioridad necesaria en las organizaciones. Pareciera que el desarrollo del talento es como algo que se tiene que hacer cuando es una prioridad en el sentido del gran retorno que genera en innovación, en impacto, la formación de los colaboradores y más aún cuando lo haces de manera muy óptima como es a través del aprendizaje adaptativo. Percibimos mucha inconsistencia en la implementación del aprendizaje adaptativo, en esta guía del aprendizaje personalizado de D2L que nos compartían, pues recientemente, pues ahí se habla de esa inconsistencia y se habla de que hay todavía pocos estudios de su impacto en las organizaciones. Bueno, ya la Fundación Bill y Melinda Gates por ahí encontraron que el aprendizaje personalizado en estudiantes les ayuda a mejorar 3 percentiles en matemáticas, que ustedes saben que es, bueno, todo un reto en nuestra sociedad contemporánea. Entonces, ¿cuál sería el futuro para ir cerrando un poco esta breve charla del aprendizaje personalizado y el aprendizaje adaptativo? Bueno, esperamos una mayor orientación de los programas centrados en el aprendedor, no centrados en lo que la organización quiere que aprenda, sino centrados en lo que la persona necesita para generar más valor a las organizaciones. El Just for Me Learning, con todos los motores estos de recomendación que nos van dando información de que, oye, te conviene ahora aprender esto y te lo va dando en pequeñas dosis para que vayas avanzando en el transcurso de las semanas y de los días. El rol de la tecnología sin duda es esencial para la escalabilidad del aprendizaje adaptativo. Y bueno, pues será más fácil diseñar programas que ayuden a las personas a ser exitosas cuando se adapten a cada uno de ellos, ¿no? Y bueno, eso le dará a las organizaciones, sin duda alguna, una velocidad de respuesta y de adaptación a los cambios sin precedente y le permitirá mantenerse relevante en un mundo tan complejo como el que estamos viviendo. Y bueno, pues les agradezco muchísimo esta atención. Ahí disculpen que la cámara no me lo permitió podérselas mostrar y presentarme, pero aquí estoy con mi correo, con el LinkedIn a sus órdenes y sigan disfrutando este foro y los dejo en manos de Tom Hack, un extraordinario líder que les va a hablar seguramente cosas muy interesantes de las tendencias de los recursos humanos.
All right. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. I'm very happy to be at this conference again, where I presented also last year. My name is Tom Haak. I'm the founder of the HR Trend Institute. And at the HR Trend Institute, we are, you could say, trend watchers in the domain of people and organization. I'm very glad I was able to follow the presentations of Marco Dondi and my friend Jorge Blandos. And well, they surely tackled a couple of things which are also high on my list. So I think my presentation will be a good add-on to their presentations. What I want to do in the next 19 minutes is tackle with you some of the things I see at this moment that are affecting the learning and development domain. There are many trends on our website, hrtrendinstitute.com. You can find a good overview of all the trends we listed for 2020, but of course, I'm not able in this short presentation to tackle them all. So I want to give you some ammunition. I will tackle 6 major areas, and unfortunately, there's no time for Q&A today, but if you have any remarks, questions, you can always link with me on LinkedIn, and then I will try to react on your remarks. Number 1 on my list, and that was the subject of Jorge, so I don't want to deal with that a lot, but I want to make some side remarks. Number 1 for the last years has always been on my list is personalization. Are you willing and able to take the individual wishes, needs, capabilities of people into account? And as Jorge explained, it will be a game changer, hopefully in the coming period. I see still organizations struggling with the concept, especially in the learning and development domain. And many organizations are struggling with the concept, and hopefully they will be able to get on the way further in the coming years. Personalization is not the same as individualization. And you sometimes get that impression. Personalization is something different because, as we know, many people work in teams, and in many organizations these days, the team is the major building block. So it's not with personalization that we say, yeah, and we pull people out of their teams and then educate them and learning them and then put them back in their teams. That's a different dimension. One of the key questions I want to add to what Jorge has been saying is, how can we apply the personalization context also in the context of excellent teamwork? So I think that's a big challenge, because as we know, also not many learning and development activities are focused on the team. Personalization, super important, and I hope you can make progress and really make it a game changer. Number 2, and Marco dealt with that extensively, so only some short remarks from my side, is around skills. Skills becoming more and more, you could say, the major building block of our, you could say, people, HR actions in organizations. We come from days where the job was the major building block, and we're moving to the situation where teams and the roles people play in teams and the underlying capabilities and skills become more and more important. If we take skills as the major building block, there are many, many advantages. And one of the advantages I would like to mention here is it will enable us to create a more diverse workforce. Because if we group skills in a job, it's more difficult to find people on the labor market. If we say we are looking for specific skill sets, we are able to attract people who have maybe a limited skill set, but are really scoring high on one or two of the skills areas. We are able to attract them better. So it will create more diversity. It will also create an increase of the use of the potential of people. Because if we are really able to tap on the skills people really master or want to master, we use their potential in a lot better way. So those are two of the major advantages. A side remark here, also you could say an advantage of using skills, and we will continue to increase productivity in the organization. I'm Dutch, I work in the Netherlands. There's a lot of talks these days in the Netherlands around scarcity on the labor market. And then automatically, the reaction seems to me to be that organization says, we need to hire more people, but we cannot find the people. There's the war for talent again. Well, you know all those stories. But there are several ways to increase your capacity. It's outside the scope of this presentation, but increasing productivity, of course, is one of the most important levers you have, because if you really increase your productivity, you might need less people. And if you use the potential of people better by focusing on skills, your productivity will increase. So thank you, Marco, for your extensive list of future-proof skills. I think that's very, very important. And we can spend the whole sessions on skills because it's easier said than done, unfortunately. Number three. Number three, you could say that's not a trend, but it's one of the long-term mega trends, is how are we dealing with speed? Things are going faster and faster and faster, and the reaction of HR and learning and development people in the organization is sometimes too slow. So ask yourself the question, are we able to react quick to the needs, wishes of individuals and teams? And in this speed, you could say a couple of things are important. And one element, and I'm sure it has been mentioned here before or will be mentioned, is the concept of learning in the flow of work. Or I saw on one of the slides, you could also say just-in-time learning. But there the question is, how can you get as close as possible to the actual work that people are doing, measure, observe what they are doing by using technology often, because the human, you could say the human observations alone are often not enough. So learning in the flow of work, how can you get close and then offer people just in time learning solutions, small learning solutions that they can use to improve what they are working on. So are you fast enough? Are you using technology? And of course, are you using analytics to speed up what you're doing? So 3 on my list, speed. We need things faster and faster, not for the future, but now, today, in the work, in the actual work of people. So I talked about personalization, the growing importance of skills, and the long-term mega trend. Things go faster and faster and faster, but are you able to adapt? Number 4 is very much related to the concept of the employee experience. And fortunately, we see technological developments that will enable us to create a lot richer experiences. And I'm sure you have studied and read about the metaverse. I'm a big believer that Web3 or the metaverse, how you exactly call it, it will offer us enormous opportunities to enrich the experience people have at work, also in the learning and development domain. We don't know exactly how it's all going to work. It's early days, but we see developments that give us a glimpse in the future. I was talking to a metaverse, you could say expert, one of these days, and she was telling me, for example, yeah, we could, for example, in the metaverse, combine people. So it's not about Tom and an avatar of Tom, but how can we, for example, combine the skills and the attitude of Tom and for let's call her Elise, and Elise and Tom together, yeah, you could say, are a new identity, are a new person in the metaverse. So we can create new people. And if we can add and create new people, again, that will give us enormous opportunities to create, one, an experience, but also a far more diverse workforce. It will empower people with certain, yeah, I don't know what the right word, but you could say with a limited skill set. It could allow people with a limited skill set to create new identities with a more extended skill set. So the metaverse will enrich experience and will, again, enable us to create a more diverse and more unbiased workforce. So I have great hopes of the metaverse. I encourage you to study what's going on there. Number 5 on my list has to do with the scope. The scope is the question, who do you consider to be your clients or your target group, however you want to call it? What I see a lot is that organizations tend to have a quite limited view. They say, we are bothered with the people in the organization, the people on our payroll. The reality is that if you look at the people who are contributing to realizing objectives of organization, you see many more groups. Clearly, of course, you have the flexible workforce. Clearly, you have candidates coming into the workforce, but there's more. There's, for example, alumni, people who once contributed, now are gone, but maybe contribute again in the future. So alumni, suppliers. So what are you doing for suppliers that work very closely to your organization? And often suppliers don't have are not as advanced in the learning and development domain as you are, so you might be able to help them. It's suppliers, it's also the community. What are you doing for your local communities to help the people in your local communities to develop? And in the end, it might also be wider, your country and the world. What are you doing also as a learning and development team or learning and development professional to make the world a better place? So think about scope. And then, of course, you might use some of the things we already discussed to really help people outside your organization. Number 5, scope. The last one I want to tackle is number 6, and that has to do with what I have called for the moment the split of human resources. And I see a split in 3 areas. One is operations. We all know operations, and most of HR and most of learning and development activities are in operations. Strategy, the HR, you could say architects, HR advisors, HR strategists. You don't need a lot of people in that box, but they are important. And the third area for the moment is called people success. those are people focused on helping individuals to, and maybe teams as well, to be better, not only at work, but also in their other aspects of life. I mentioned that as a separate box because what we generally see, that the three areas are too much blurred, and they always tend to put the organizational objectives on number one. It's organization first, people second, and that does not always work well. The people success area, there we need coaches, trainers, advisors, etc., that are focused on individuals and where it's very clear that those people are there to help you. Tom, we are there to help you. And if it's too much connected to the organization, people don't buy it. They say, yeah, Tom, you say that my development is your number one priority, but I know that your number one priority is to get your job done, to get your project realized, to fulfill your organizational objectives. So we need a separate focus on people success, maybe even separate from the organization. And we have seen developments there that are sometimes called development as a service, offering people developmental opportunities to realize their dreams maybe. And often the dreams of people or the objectives of people are not necessarily the same as the organization. So I encourage you to look at that. Organizations find it difficult because they say, yeah, but then we are developing people for careers and for a life outside our organization, and we want to retain them as long as possible. I think those days are gone. We should take also here a personalized approach. Some people are there for life, some people for a couple of years, some people for a couple of months. Let's all help them to realize what they want. So I tackled six elements. There are many more, but this is my selection for today. Personalization, a focus on skills, faster, the experience and using the metaverse to enrich the employee experience, challenge you to take a wider scope and focus on people success and split HR in those three areas. It was a pleasure talking to you. I've not seen you, I've not heard you. If you want to connect to me on LinkedIn, on YouTube. You can also find many other videos, etc. And I hope to be back at your conference next year. Bye-bye.
Muchas gracias. Gracias, Tom, por compartir todo tu conocimiento, tu predisposición, tu entusiasmo y toda tu experiencia, por supuesto. Bien decías de reencontrarnos el año que viene. Bueno, que así sea. Agradecíamos a Tom por brindar su tiempo, su experiencia, su entusiasmo, y como bien decía él, esperamos reencontrarnos el año que viene, así que así sea. Bueno, retomamos y pedimos disculpas nuevamente por los problemas técnicos que están dificultando que iniciara a tiempo y que nos robó estos minutos. Mil disculpas, hubo problemas con la plataforma, se están resolviendo, esperamos poder cubrirlos. Perfecto, se escucha perfecto. ¡Qué alivio! Ahí estamos. Mil disculpas. Estamos resolviendo los inconvenientes técnicos. Despidiendo a Tom, y antes de pasar a los workshops, importantísimo agradecerle a los sponsors que nuevamente nos acompañan este año, porque bueno, como sabemos, es destacable el apoyo de los patrocinadores para que esto se lleve adelante, para que se pueda materializar. Así que bueno, si se puede compartir, podríamos ver los sponsors oro, así los mencionamos como se merecen en agradecimiento. Cypher Learning, y sí, el Tecnológico de Monterrey, Universidad Europea, dijimos Zoom, también Unió Consorci Formación. Los sponsors plata, BeChange, Cornerstone, Desire to Learn, GoFluent, el Instituto Chileno Norteamericano, iSpring, LearnLight, Performance, Smalltech, ahí los estamos visualizando en pantalla, Speaks, Universidad Blas Pascal, Universidad El Bosque, sponsors bronce, Acredita, Universidad de Manresa, los Media Partners, ORH, Opino, Info, Negocios también. Agradecemos, como siempre, como el año pasado y este año también, a quienes nos acompañan del otro lado. A ustedes que están de la pantalla, son más de 20 países los que hoy están representados por los asistentes. Así que bueno, vamos a continuar con esta gran jornada que nos